Good evening, everybody. Great. All right. Welcome. I'm John Igliozzi, the President of the Providence City Council of the State of Rhode Island. We're going to begin this meeting. It's Monday, June 14, 2021. This is a City Council as a whole meeting. Mr. Clerk, could you roll call, please?
Council President Igliozzi.
Aye.
Councilwoman Anthony.
Here.
Majority Whip Castillo.
Present.
Councilman Correa is absent. Council President Pro Tempore Espinal.
Present.
Councilman Gonzalez.
Aye. Present.
Deputy Majority Leader Harris.
Present.
Councilor Kerwin.
Present.
Councilwoman LaFortune.
Present.
Councilor Miller.
Present.
Senior Deputy Majority Leader Narducci.
Here.
Councilwoman Ryan is absent. Councilor Salvatore is absent. Majority Leader Taylor.
Here.
You have 11 present and 3 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The next item is the invocation. Could I ask if Deputy Majority Leader Harris would conduct the invocation for this fine body in this evening? That's okay?
I'm always willing to pray. Thank you for the honor.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, we call upon you today, Father, because we know you know all things. We know that you have everything in control. So we're asking you today to bless this body, bless this message today, bless the things that we learn from the school department. Bless our questions and the things that we need to know more as leaders for us to be able to focus on the issue at hand. Father, I want to thank you for our city, our beautiful city of Providence, and all that we have in Providence. We should be grateful. We're very grateful. So I ask you tonight to bless our children in our school department, bless our teachers, our leaders, our educators, and most of all, bless the body, this council body. In Jesus' name, I close this prayer. Amen.
Amen.
Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Could I respectfully request Councilwoman Kerwin, could she lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thank you, Councilwoman Kerwin. Councilwoman?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you once again, my council colleagues, and welcome to the Providence School Department. And first item, Mr. Clerk.
Item 1, discussion relative to the Providence Public School Department fiscal year 2021 to 2022 budget. The following have been invited: Dr. Javier Montañez, Interim Superintendent, Providence Public School Department; Zachary Scott, Chief of Operations, Providence Public School Department; Arthur Nevins, Chief of Staff, Providence Public School Department; Erland Ojel, Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Special Projects, Providence School Department; Christopher Pettish, Senior Budget Officer, Providence Public School Department.
And now all these individuals in attendance.
I believe so.
Mr. Clerk, well, can you now have these individuals be sworn in?
Those of you who are attending, let me double check and make sure. I see Councilwoman Ryan is now present. It appears that all of them, I will promote Mr. Nevins to panelist in case he's going to participate. We have Mr. Scott, if you're present, could you let me know who might be speaking and presenting at this meeting?
I'm Mr. Scott.
Mr. Clerk, I'd like you to swear all the individuals in.
Okay.
So just go one by one and swear them in, please.
Could those of you who are participating in presenting, please raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Please say it loud and please say it proud. We cannot hear you.
I do.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next, could you please identify, I'll start off with the interim superintendent. Could you please state your name for the record, please, and your position?
Interim Superintendent, Dr. Javier Montanez.
Thank you. Next is Zachary Scott.
Sorry. Sorry, can you hear us all right?
Scott,
Can you hear us okay?
yeah, a little bit better. Could you state your name and your position, please, Mr. Scott?
Zachary Scott, Deputy Superintendent of Operations.
All right. Mr. Nevins, can you please state your name? Is Mr. Nevins present? Okay. Do I see who else is at the table with the school department?
Mr. Pettis.
1 second, Mr. Clerk. At the table, who else is at the school department table? Can you state your name and your position, please? Gotta speak loud, folks.
Senior Advisor to the Commissioner of Eye.
Thank you. And then, and the last person, I guess, is is Erlen Rajo there? Erlen? Okay. How about Christopher Pesci?
Chris Batista, Executive Director of Finance, School Department.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being sworn in. Okay, with that said, so gentlemen, do you have a presentation you want to begin with? And who will lead that presentation?
Will be led by the superintendent and the rest of the party.
Okay, so do you guys have a better audio over there? Or is that why you're looking for more money?
Come on, Mr. President.
All right. So we'll pause for the school department for a moment. Ladies and gentlemen of the council and the public.
Is that any better, Mr. President?
Council members, how is it for you? I see Councilman Anthony, she's shaking her head.
Not very clear. It's just not very clear. I'm not, maybe it's just me.
No, it's not. It's just you, Councilwoman.
I agree. It's not very clear.
It's not clear. Can they share the PowerPoint, the document, so at least we could follow if we can't hear?
Yep, we'll get there. I also make a note, I have to acknowledge, Councilwoman Ryan is present too, by the way. Mr. Clerk, do you have any suggestions for the school department?
I do. If the parties at the table that are presenting, if you could use the telephone option, and maybe it actually would probably be better than what we're experiencing right now, if you could just pull out a cell phone and put it on the table in front of you and choose in the lower left-hand corner on the audio settings to join by phone audio and dial in to those prompts. And then you'll need to disconnect. Yes, if that works, then we should be able to hear you a lot better. Just, we need to make sure at that table are connected to the Zoom meeting so we don't get feedback from the laptops into that audio device.
If you move closer to the device, can you hear us better now? I see some nods.
No. Do you have a speakerphone? Okay. You want to use would you like to use one of your phones, your cell phone? Put that on speaker maybe?
We can try to use one of our laptops and cut the audio on it, the volume, so we don't have any feedback. So let's try that.
Chris, how you doing, Chris?
I just remind everybody that we're still on the record, so what I'll do is if you want, school department, do I need to stand at ease so you can take care of your technical difficulties, or where are we? You want 5 minutes? Okay. Council members will stand at ease for 5 minutes.
Can everyone hear us now?
Loud and clear.
Super.
Loud and clear here.
Much good. Very, yes, much better. All right. We all set now, I think?
Think so.
Okay. All right, so let's get back in session. Mr. Clerk, please begin the recording. Oh, let the record reflect that Kenny Cheverini, the city solicitor, is present, please. And who from the school department will be leading this presentation? State your name again, and then I guess you want us to go to the PowerPoint, and then, or do you want to say a few words, then go to the PowerPoint? Gentlemen, I'm giving you deference.
We can open up the PowerPoint and then the superintendent. Apologies in advance for the delays on the technical side here. Victor, if you're able to share.
Mr. Clerk, can you put the PowerPoint on?
Sure can.
And I want to make sure all the council members can see the PowerPoint. Council members, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
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 Great. Thank you. All right. School department, you have the mic. You can begin your presentation, please.
Thank you. This is Interim Superintendent Dr. Montanez. Good evening, President Igliozzi and Honorable Providence City Council. I'm honored to be here tonight as Providence Public Schools Interim Superintendent. I'm joined this evening by Providence Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Zach and Executive Director of Finance Chris Batisi. We have a brief presentation for you on the fiscal year 2022 budget, and then are happy to answer any questions. I have to apologize in advance. The district is also before the Senate Oversight Tonight Committee this evening, so I may have to step out during the presentation. Before that, I'd like to introduce myself and talk a bit about our budget and high levels. While I may be new to the role of interim superintendent, not new to the district, I have been an educator and a leader in PPSD for nearly 25 years. As a teacher, as an assistant principal, and as a principal, I have seen firsthand how the budgetary decisions made at the district level impact learning, social emotional health, and the safety of our schools. Where and how we spend our monies matters. This budget is student-centered and will help us advance our goals in our turnaround action plan. Less than 2 years ago, members of our committee came together with RIDE and outlined clear goals and action steps for the district transformation. We've made a lot of progress this past year. I saw it myself as a principal at Leventon Dual Language Elementary School. Before there were more needs to be done, and it requires making critical investments to support student achievement, professional learning, and community outreach. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott and I have prepared a presentation for you. But first, I would like to quickly outline some of the investments that form my personal experience as a PPSD principal, I believe are most critical to the district's success. Starting off with counselors at the elementary level. As an elementary principal, I cannot tell you how critical it is for family engagement, social emotional health, and career readiness for all PPSD students, even the youngest of learners. Have a school counselor. Expanding high quality pre-K. As any elementary teacher or principal, how big the impact of high quality pre-K has on students' academic trajectory, not only in the kindergarten, but throughout their educational career. It is one of the earliest, most cost-effective interventions that we can make to give our students a strong start or increase professional development for staff. Providence schools are full of incredible, hardworking teachers. We need to give them the support and the professional development they deserve. I'm so excited that this budget will allow us to pay for educators for 4 additional extra days for professional development before the start of the school year. Community specialist roles. We are creating 26 new school community specialists and culture coordinators roles, focusing on recruiting bilingual Providence residents into our schools to strengthen the relationship with our families. Continue critical investments in translation and interpretation. Not every school is a bilingual school as mine, and Providence is lucky to be a rich melting pot. With families who speak dozens of languages, being able to communicate regularly with all our families is essential. At this moment, I would like to go into our PowerPoint. The PPSD budget update for the school board.
Excuse me, am I able to move the PowerPoint forward?
I was just going to ask, are you, because the PowerPoint hasn't moved since the introductory cover sheet. You guys looking to change that?
Yes.
Or keep it the same?
We were just getting into the presentation.
All right, thank you.
Is there a way to advance it, Mr. Selly?
Yes, you have control.
I've got it. Thank you.
So this is the
Got
budget
you.
overview.
Got your control.
Budget overview for fiscal year 2020. Next, please. We all know that this year was one of unprecedented uncertainties. That's been especially true here at PPSD. The district financial outlook had continuously changed since the start of the pandemic last March. In February of last year, former Governor Raimundo proposed a budget to our enrollment numbers, at the time indicating that we will receive an additional $15.7 million for fiscal year 21. But when the pandemic started in March, the level of the state and the city funding became unclear. In June, the state budget for fiscal year 20 was reduced, and we had to backfill with URSA funds. We then planned for levels funding in 2021. In September, we received Corona relief funds to support reopening. That was months after we had begun preparing for the in-person learning. In December, the state passed the fiscal year of 2021 budget 6 months later, and then anticipated with an $8 million increase in the PPSD.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Councilman Ducci.
I'm trying to look for the PowerPoint that they're showing, the one that they showed the cover on. I can't find the page that they're showing the budget overview on.
Yes, doesn't seem to have been presented to us.
The last 2 pages I didn't have. The only one I had was the FY 2022 budget, where it said number 1,
Yep.
budget overview, number 2, budget details.
You're correct. They did not submit the PowerPoint to the clerk's office.
This PowerPoint I do have now, but it's different from.
You just received it right now.
That's right. Yeah.
We do not, so I stand correct, not corrected. We did not, the clerk nor did we receive this PowerPoint. So we can let them continue to move forward and explain it, and then the clerk can try to email it to everybody right now. But right now, let's let the school department finish their presentation, then we can follow up with additional questions and requests.
I just want to make sure it was, it was something we didn't have, that I'm not.
No, you're correct, Senior Deputy Majority Leader.
Thanks, President.
So, thank you. Mr. Superintendent, you have the mic, sir. You can continue, please.
Thank you. Finally, we spent the remainder of our CRF fund dollars to meet the deadlines for the spending. In January of this, we received our 2021 spending plans. Despite of the significant financial uncertainty that we faced over the last year, we have been able to make investments to support the safety of reopening as well as accelerating the turnaround. As a principal, I can talk about how critical these investments were to our students, our staff, and the interest of time. I am going to draw your attention just to a few. As we see above, in academic investment of educational materials, we have a K-8 adoption of the district-wide ELA and math curriculum, online platform for VLA students, and additional professional development for all staff, hardware and educational equipment that was needed. Over 12,000 Chromebooks were given, 2,000 teacher laptops, 1,300 hotspots that I can't say how important that was for the families, and 120 smart boards into classrooms, and over 800 sound amplifiers and smart boards. We've also, for the transportation and food services, additional bus runs to support social distancing, breakfast and lunch in the classroom supplies, bottled water, increased RIPTA eligibility, additional support for safety and screening, healthcare professional and staff to support the screening for staff and students, translation services to support COVID release communication, 60 building-based substitutes, clean and HVAC repairs, additional 60 custodian staff to support the increased cleaning, 90 boxes of window fans, and 800 HEPA filters to support ventilation. In PEEs, equipment and supplies, over 200,000 masks, 20,000 face shields, 20,000 bottles of hand sanitizers, and 5,000 disinfectant bottles and wipes. While the investment we made in these academic interventions was expected, many of these expenditures were directly response to the pandemic and completely unforeseen the year prior. Now, at this moment, I will turn it over to Zach to talk about the plans to continue our progress through fiscal year 2022 budget.
Thank you, Superintendent. Just to build on what the superintendent was just sharing, we're incredibly proud of our work over the past year and being able to open our schools safely and successfully. And while many other districts in the large urban districts in the Northeast struggled due to operational, financial, or instructional challenges, we were excited to be able to bring back our elementary students every day and our middle and high school students every other day, while offering our families who wanted one a virtual option. So we look forward to building on that success, as well as our efforts to accelerate our turnaround efforts that we were able to do this year as well. As the superintendent mentioned, while a lot of the investments we talked about were related to safety, there were also a significant number related to instruction and academic materials, as well as hardware and supplies that will last for years to come. So we look forward to building on our momentum as we move into FY22. The turnaround action plan that we've mentioned is really what drives and guides district activities each year, year over year. And so that's the tool that is outlined 3 key pillars of excellence in learning, world-class talent, and engaged communities, along with efficient district systems that support those efforts. And because it guides our activities, it also guides our investment decisions. And so as we'll see, that's how we'll talk through the investments that we plan to make for this coming year. We also recognize the unique context that we're in given COVID-19. And so while we need to plan for and continue work on the turnaround effort, we also need to recognize a strong effort that must be undertaken to accelerate learning, particularly for those students most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So to talk a little bit more about how we think about our financial position and investments as a district. So we certainly have to focus our priority and core investments that are outlined in the turnaround action plan among those three pillars through the use of our local fund. That's for sustainability purposes to ensure that we can continue with those investments for years to come. At the same time, we know that there are stimulus dollars used to come and to support both the short-term and medium-term needs that we have for learning acceleration in response to the pandemic. Now, while those are two separate pots of funds, we need to figure out how to make sure that they support one another and enhance one another so that our investments in turnaround support and enhance our efforts at acceleration and vice versa. To give a whole look, sorry, I want to double show my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So just to give a little bit of the highlights.
Oh, no, one second, please. Mr. Clerk, what's the issue?
So everyone can see the presentation I'm sharing. I'm not sure if Mr. Scott is referring to his own screen because we're not looking at his own screen.
Mr. Scott, we're seeing right now, I don't even know what it is, but it says budget overview, and you got the three, your three boxes, excellence in learning, which then says about hiring people, talent, and then engage communities 26X, and then it says increase school-based discretionary funding. Is that the screen you were talking about?
It is. I think there might have been confusion, but that's the screen that we're referring to. I think we're all set.
Just so you understand that right now, per our controls, you have control of the screen.
Got it.
So whatever's on your screen is on our screen right now at this time.
Understood. Thank you.
So that's where we are. Please continue, sir.
Thank you. So the presentation, as the superintendent mentioned today, will focus on our FY22 budget. So we will focus on those investments that are aligned with the turnaround action plan. I'll highlight several of these investments that we'll talk through in greater detail as we go into the next section. The first is around excellence in learning and making investment at adding additional literacy and math coaches at the middle and high school level. We know that is critical to accelerate and develop the development of our teachers, and is also a requirement under the Department of Justice Settlement Agreement. We're also seeking to add 18 additional guidance counselors at the elementary level, given the needs of our students in any year, but particularly coming out of a pandemic. And we're also excited to expand additional pre-K seats, around 120, to expand the access to that for residents of Providence. We're also excited to be able to add 9 additional assistant principals at our elementary schools. And those are at schools that currently only have one building administrator, which can make a challenge to lead those schools effectively. We're also adding additional professional development for teachers, given the kind of desire for that articulated in the turnaround action plan, as well as research showing the importance of that in improving student outcomes. Lastly, on engaged community, we heard loud and clear of the need to engage and build culture within our schools, as well as engage with members of the school community. And so we are looking to add 26 additional community school specialists and culture coordinators to support that effort. On efficient district systems, we have increased school-based discretionary funding by over $400,000 to ensure that those leaders who work most closely with our students are able to spend money that meets their needs. And we'll also talk a little bit later about an establishment of a capital revolving fund to support long-term capital improvements and increase the efforts of our long-term financial capital plan. So with that, I'll start into the detail section. There are some slides that I'll talk through a bit of what we just shared, but in greater detail, and then we're happy to answer questions at the end. This gives you an overview of the expected revenue from FY22. So you'll see from left to right, starting with the FY21 budget, the RIDE requested and the governor requested budget, as well as the 2022 PPSD proposed budget. So we're looking at a proposed increase of around $8.5 million, 3.6 of which would come from state aid and 4.9 of which would come from city aid. State aid is largely driven by the funding formula and enrollment, while city aid, as we've shared previously, is dictated by the statute under the Crowley Act, which obligates municipalities to increase funding to schools at the same percentage that total state aid in the state of Rhode Island is increased. So taken together, on the revenue side, that yields a roughly $8.5 million increase for fiscal year 22. To talk through the planned expenditures that kind of the big pieces of expense that will total up to that increase in revenue is what I'll walk you through here. So you'll see the first two lines of contractual salary increases as well as benefits and retirement. The contractual salary increases are those for, employee groups with which we're under contract that are set to receive salary increases or step increases. And collectively, those total roughly $6 million. The next slide, and we'll talk about this on the next slide in greater detail, is a net change in positions. So on the overview, you saw kind of an investment in a number of positions. A lot of that was based on restructuring at our schools. That led to this roughly $900K projected salary savings. Below that, you'll see an investment in professional development. This is to add increased professional development prior to the start of the school year. This is something we were able to do this current school year as part of the statewide calendar, and yielded tremendous success in both opening safely, but also as we started to roll out new curriculum, prepare our teachers for the school year. The next one is school discretionary funding. As I mentioned, it's called Tools of the Trade, but essentially discretionary funds that schools have to spend on the needs of their students, and that has been increased by over $400K. IT enhancements and service contracts, which we'll talk through in greater detail. IT enhancements are two projects we're doing to support improvements related to efficiency in the district. And service contracts are based on both our custodial and transportation contracts. The LEA tuition contribution is based on changes in enrollment between PPSD and charter schools. And that is something that the LEA contributes to our to charter schools. The next two of curriculum supplies, reduction in after-school shift to stimulus. These were two object codes or lines that were increased in FY21 substantially. And the first was to do a one-time purchase for high school curriculum to mirror the similar purchase we did at K-8 the year before. So it was increased one time, and that's why you see the reduction for next year. We also significantly increased the spending on after school in FY21 in the local budget, but plan to continue to have increased after school programming, but having it done so through stimulus funds. And all taken together, that's what gets to the $8.5 million increase in spending that you'll see. So now I'm going to dive through a few of these areas that are of kind of particular importance. So one of the things, a number of the priorities outlined in the turnaround action plan, including increased social emotional learning support to students, increased pre-kindergarten, increased better coaching of our teachers, as well as better connections with our school and community. We wanted to first look at our current resources to see how we could use those resources to better meet the needs and desires outlined by the community in our turnaround action plan. So this year, while last year we took some significant restructuring of central office, we did take a similar kind of restructuring approach about how we align our resources to the priorities of the district and our schools. And so to talk through a little bit, both first at the elementary level and at the secondary level. So at the elementary level, one of the strong desires was to have more aligned coaching that focused and embedded support for multilingual learners through all coaching. We also had a desire to increase pre-kindergarten, as well as provide social emotional supports in the form of guidance counselors, as well as provide additional, a deeper administrative bench for our schools, particularly those without assistant principals. To accomplish this, we made reductions in areas where we had significant declines in enrollment and made reductions in teaching positions there. We then made some conversions around, we had a kind of a group of coaches, and in some cases 3 coaches per teacher, that we felt wasn't fully aligned with having an embedded approach to multilingual learner coaching. So we, through a conversion, had those positions so that every school has both a multilingual literacy math coach that are certified in ESL. And that helped us both expand pre-K as well as add guidance counselors at every one of our elementary schools, as well as assistant principals at our schools that lacked a second administrator. At the secondary level, to meet the goal of creating better connections and support with our school community, as well as culture within the school, and to move from a kind of instructional model where there was no instructional coaching at middle schools or high schools, we undertook similar changes. So one of the first things was looking at the way we had scheduled at middle and high and seeing that historically we had scheduled based on kind of total potential capacity at a school rather than actual enrollment. And so we were able to, through scheduling, make adjustments to teaching positions at the middle and high school level. From there and through conversions, we were able to ensure that all of our middle and high schools who had desperately been seeking literacy and math coaches, that each of our schools will next year have a literacy and math coach at the secondary level. And in addition to that, we'll be adding school community specialists and culture coordinators to help build culture within schools, as well as expand impact and interactions with the school community. So to shift from some of the personnel changes to some other areas of investment that are connected from the slides before. So we're excited to continue investments in social, emotional, and community supports. Some of these I've mentioned already, including the guidance counselors and school community coordinators, but also some multi-tiered support specialists who work across schools to help school leadership teams develop programs to support student behavior and student attendance. We're also excited to sustain investments that better allow us to support student social emotional learning and community supports. So during the pandemic, we greatly increased our psychological services as well as interpretation and translation services that we will sustain even after the pandemic. We'll also look to continue with our school-based mental health collaborative, which enhances the social emotional learning supports we provide to our schools, and increase the number of bilingual service providers and mental health first aid screening of our employees. We also want to call attention to the Capital Revolving Fund. Historically, PPSD has really only taken advantage of housing aid reimbursements for projects that were included in the multi-year capital plan. This resulted in underinvestment in our facilities and missed funding opportunities. Let me give you an example of how this would have happened. In prior years, if we had a leaky roof or a boiler that required repair, we did our best to identify available funding to support that emergency repair. Well, we'll never be able to do away with emergencies. A revolving fund allows us to plan ahead and do those activities like roof repairs, boiler repairs, and other enhancements proactively, so we don't have to wait until there's an emergency. Just as importantly, when we do that, we're able to receive housing aid reimbursement up to 91% of our investment. We can use that, the investment in our facilities to pay for future funds, and that's hence the revolving fund, and that allows us to continue once we seed it with investments for the future. So to do this, we're shifting approximately.
Scott,
yes.
Mr. Scott, just really quick, is the capital revolving fund for you guys now going to take over control and ownership of all the city buildings too? So is that the plan, that you guys are going to take ownership and control of the school buildings as part, since you're going to create your own little mini capital revolving fund, and you're going to be looking to, I guess, float money and go after money. So is there a plan also for us to give build all the city school buildings to you guys, and you're going to deal with it now? Is that part of your plan?
No, it's not part of our plan to take control of the building, but we feel like this can support the broader capital plan that we're working closely with the city on to enhance investments in the district. And we're happy to work closely with the city and the city council on how we prioritize those projects, but we do not intend to
Get more detail with that. I'm sorry, just continue, please. I just was wondering if that was the case, since it looks like you're building your own little government here. So can you just continue on, please?
Sure. As I mentioned, this will allow us to seed and support projects in future years. So just to give you a sense of what some of these projects are, it allows us to undertake some district-wide initiatives that are not included in the capital plan, such as improvements to bathrooms and locker rooms. And it also allows us to enhance the scope of projects that are already in the capital plan. And this allows us to bring buildings through renovation up to what the school building authority calls like new status, which triggers and unlocks our ability to get reimbursement for furniture, equipment, and supplies. So we think it allows us to make our dollar go further. To talk through a little bit more in detail of a few of the other line items you saw. So from benefits and retirement, you'll see here how much of that is coming from projected increases in active and retiree medical, as well as city and state retirement, as well as a few other items. And that's where you get the 2.9 million that you saw on the previous slide. We also anticipate increases in our service contracts in both transportation and custodial. So the transportation contract is an increase of 3.5%, which is, we are in the first year of our new contract with First Student. And that 3.5%, from my understanding, is significantly less than what has been in the first year of contracts historically. Our contract is set to increase at 2.5%, which yields roughly 300 you see there. On IT enhancements, we're undertaking a record digitization process to digitize our central records, most of which are in hard copy format from decades and decades of prior students that we're looking to put to digitize to make it easier to access for families. And then hiring platform, we currently have a hiring platform that we are seeking to enhance, and that would likely result in a one-time increase of 100K to support that. Obviously, we have some key variables that we're watching closely as the year comes to an end. Both, state aid where the aid we included here is our estimate of what state aid will be, but we obviously need to see once the final state budget is passed. Our CBA increases were in active negotiations with the PTU, so any agreement there would ultimately obviously impact our spending plan for the coming year. With that, we tried to go into the details on areas that we thought folks would have questions, but we're more than happy to answer questions that you may have at this time. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may. John, you're on mute.
Thank you, Senior Deputy. Just want to let the council know this won't be the first or last time we'll have the school department before us. But I'd ask everybody as we go down the litany of questions that, which I'm going to try to give every council member an opportunity to ask questions and get their answers. And if they don't get the responses they want, the information they need, we will bring, of course, the school department back for additional questioning. With that, I have Councilwoman Anthony first, then Councilman Gunkos. Councilwoman Anthony, you have the mic.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you so much for the presentation tonight from the school department. I do want to thank you for all the extra hard work you did to keep our students in school during the COVID. I really do appreciate it. I know everyone does. I have a question on how much money is the either RIDE, I guess it would be RIDE, receiving from ESSER funds and the CARES Act? In other words, I'm sure that there's been money coming in from the federal government. I'd like to know how that impacts what you're asking for from us for the additional 4.9 million. Is that what you're asking for? So I'd like to know how your federal funds reimbursement works in terms of how it impacts our budget.
Absolutely. So we've to date received funds in the form of ESSER, which was and CRF, which were in the first round of stimulus, which had initially a December 2020 deadline. So we made all efforts to spend it before then. Right as we closed the end of this calendar year, that deadline was extended, but we had already planned and expended those funds. We do have ESSER, there are 2 rounds of stimulus funds that are coming in, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So they each have a different allocation amount and timeline. So I'm just trying to pull the amounts. So ESSER 2 represents $57.7 million. And that has a multi-year shelf life that runs through, September 30th of 2024. And then ESSER 3 runs through September of 2025. And that the allocation we currently have is 129.6 million. So significant amounts of funding. I would say we know how expensive it was to open this year and how much recovery and acceleration is required. And so we're fortunate that we have this to last over several years. And we know that once that's done, we'll need to sustain investments that we're making in our local dollars when that stimulus funds goes away. So we certainly are receiving a significant amount of money, but want to make sure we are being smart about prioritizing our long-term investments once that funding goes away.
May I just have a follow-up question, Council President? So my understanding, so that those figures that you're receiving, the figures you just read, the CRF and the ESSER, so those are for statewide or for Providence, or how are you spending those funds?
That is specifically, so Victor can speak a little bit more to the statewide allocation. This is the allocation that comes to PPSD. So each school department or school district receives that, and that is the district amount.
And so is that reflected somewhere in your budget, those funds? Because you're asking for an increase from us, and then you have all these federal funds coming in. So do you have somewhere in your budget, a specific budget that shows where that is? Because that seems like a lot of money. And now you're asking for one, and I know it's formulaic, the 4.9 million, but I'd like to know where those funds are being spent.
Absolutely. So in our budget book, we've included those kind of total figures that I just shared, that those funds were released now, and we're in the process of working with the community on identifying how those funds will be spent. We certainly have been planning and have initial plans on how that will be used, but because it has a longer kind of term, this will be kind of a sustained engagement that we have in our community. So beginning next week, we'll be having sessions with members of the community to get their feedback on our use of ESSER funds. And so we don't have that full spending plan laid out for those 3 to 4 years of the investments, but we certainly have already started the process of making and planning for next year. But we'll seek to continue community engagement as we seek to fully plan for those funds.
Thank you. And just one more, and I'm sorry, I know everybody has questions, but the $6 million that you're asking to start your capital revolving fund. So that $6 million you have in your budget that you're going to shift into a revolving fund for projects that up until now the city has been performing. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Correct. And we will work with the city just like we work in tandem with them on the long-term capital plan to improve our facilities. So this is something that, the capital plan that is underway is something we work closely with members of the city of Providence, and we will continue to do so on the revolving fund.
But that's money that you're controlling and we're no longer able to control. I just don't understand. It seems like an extra layer of bureaucracy that we're paying for, and I just don't understand the thinking behind that.
I mean, what I would say is that before this fund was not available and we were having to respond reactively to situations like this and couldn't make some of these sustained investments beyond our capital plan that we haven't been able to before. So this, by putting this money into this fund, it will allow us to continue making, as we receive the kind of aid, housing aid reimbursement, that this fund will kind of replenish year after year. So we think it is something that we consistently hear from the community about a desire to improve our facilities. And so this seems like something that is responsive to something we hear daily about, the desires clearly in the turnaround action plan, as well as what we hear day to day from our students, families, and teachers.
And are we, one last question, are we as a city allowed to receive the housing aid reimbursement, or is that just something that RIDE can receive?
So I think, so.
PSD, sorry.
Yeah, the city receives it for when they do that, like the capital bonding, that they get city aid reimbursement for that. These projects would be, this reimbursement would come back so that it could replenish this fund to support longer term investments.
Thank you.
But it's not supplanting or replacing, it's adding to the capital work already underway by the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Anthony. Councilman Gunkoff, then Councilman Narducci. Councilman Gunkoff, you have the mic.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you all for your important service to the children and family of the city of Providence. You have a monumental job before you, and we want to thank you in advance for the work that you will do, and we want to thank you for your leadership. I want to revisit Councilwoman Anthony's point. As you know, last year there was a $140 million bond referendum that's going to advance the city's 10-year commitment to invest up to $400 million in school infrastructure. You know, you intend to manage some of your own capital improvement projects, but who will be a part of that process specifically? How do you intend to regulate that so that it's not a slush fund of superfluous spending, and what are the specifics on how that money will be regulated?
So we plan to share publicly, just like we do in our capital plan, what the plans are for those funds, what the kind of how those projects will be decided. And I'm happy to share a few of those projects that we've mentioned, like enhancing any of the capital projects we have underway, as well as investments in school bathrooms and locker rooms. So that's not something that we have our kind of monthly meeting around school facilities work, and that would be included, kind of a report on the work there would be included in that, just like we report out on activities under the on the capital plan.
Okay, and is there a fleshed out plan in regards to who's going to be a part of that process?
So we work with the school that to receive housing aid, it needs to be approved and reviewed by the school building authority. So it needs to have an engineer, it needs to have a number of kind of meet a number of specs to get that reimbursement. So if you're talking about how we determine and allocate like which projects are kind of move forward, we're open to feedback on how that, how that project, on how those projects would be identified.
Great, and I would venture to say that I'm sure there's a member of the city council who would love to be a part of that process. So thank you very much for that, and I hope that you will consider that in the future. Is that something that you can commit to, or?
I'd want to confer. It seems, listen, we want to make our facilities, improve our facilities like you all do as well. So I don't see why there'd be any reason why we wouldn't do that. So I would want to confer with other folks, but we can certainly get back to you, but I don't foresee it being a problem about having a member of the council and other voices on this to make sure we're prioritizing the projects that are most important to our communities.
Great, thank you for that. And you have $3.4 million earmarked for professional development. How many teachers, just curious, are participating in that professional development? And tell us a little bit more about what professional development opportunities your faculty and staff will be engaged in.
Absolutely. So this would be mandatory professional development for all of our teachers 4 days prior to the start of the school year. So we currently have one professional development day built into the contract. A lot, if you look nationally, that's far less professional development, mandatory and required professional development than any other districts across the country. So this is adding 4 days to that, and it was kind of an effort we did this year. Well, we're kind of finalizing the exact scope and sequence for those days, just to give you an outline of what will be included in there. So we obviously care about both district initiatives as well as school level initiatives. So, last year and what will continue this year as we're implementing both the second year of a curriculum, math and ELA for elementary and middle school, as well as brand new district-wide ELA and math curriculum at the high school level. We'll have PD specifically focused on developing our educators in using those that new curriculum as we start the school year. So there'll be some district-wide efforts around that, as well as if last year serves as an example around social emotional learning, as well as having individuals who share common jobs. So having our math teachers from across the district, having our coaches, having our social workers work in kind of job-alike groups so that they're learning and gaining from one another.
Great. So I'm assuming that you're going to have consultants come in from those companies who manage those curriculums and some of that learning. Is that correct?
That may be the case. I think for the kind of existing curriculum, one of the things that was important was that we launched this year was we did have a lot of outside support for training our staff in how to implement that curriculum. But as we are now in the second year, the hope is that a lot of our instructional coaches can actually lead that professional development. But for some of the new curriculum we're rolling out, we might require some additional support as that is new to us.
That's fascinating, because if it's all going to be done in-house for the most part, $3.4 million does seem like a significant amount of money. What's the amount of professional development dollars allocated to each faculty member?
So the $3.4 million is directly to pay teachers. It's not for consultants. It's to make this a mandatory requirement for teachers to come. So that is the amount. It's going to depend on their specific salary, but that's the amount that's how that professional development funding is being spent.
So to be clear, we're paying $3.4 million to teachers as opposed to consultants who would be educating teachers?
Correct. So that is to have mandatory professional development for our teachers.
Okay, well, I'm an educator myself, and I would venture to say that if you're passionate about teaching and learning, that's something that you would just do out of the goodness of your heart because you want to be a better educator and you want to be someone who continues to learn and grow as a professional. That's a lot of money to be spending on professional development and to specifically be paying teachers to do. So I'm just trying to grapple with that $3.4 million to pay teachers to undergo professional development. That just seems very lofty.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, we hope too that people would take this seriously and commit to doing it without additional funding. But as a way to make it mandatory, that's how we are. That's why we are paying that amount of money.
Great. And it's great to see the investment in pre-K and guidance counselors at the elementary school level. What's the average class size in Providence Public Schools?
I don't have that off the top of my head. The class size maximum is 26, but I can get you we can get that for you. I don't have the exact class size. It's going to vary based on educational type and grade level, but we can give you an overall average.
Got it. And you mentioned, teaching reductions as a result of enrollments, but it seems like there's going to be some additional support roles in the form of math and literacy coaches. Is that push in or pull out support? And how are you going to be differentiating the needs of all of your students with that additional support? And particularly, those who need remedial support.
So the coaches their work is around supporting and coaching and developing teachers in their building. So they're not pulling out individual or pushing in individual students. So the goal here is to improve the abilities of our teachers. And so much of the research out there goes to show that both professional development, instructional coaching, and kind of best-in-class curriculum allows you to move student outcomes. So those coaches are supporting our teachers both with that new curriculum as well as with overall improvements to their instructional practices.
Okay, so that's very alarming to me because again, we're spending $3.4 million that's going directly to teachers for professional development, and then we're spending additional dollars that are going directly to teachers so that they could teach other teachers as opposed to utilizing those resources to go directly to students. And I mean, if we've got math and literacy coaches, they should be in classrooms to reduce class sizes and to help students who need that remedial support. If we're spending $3.4 million for professional development, why are we spending additional dollars on math and literacy coaches if they're going to be teaching teachers?
So a couple things, and the superintendent can add to anything from his personal experience that he thinks is helpful here. You know, I'd say one, I know we're focusing on the coaches, but there are a number of additional positions like the school community specialists, like the guidance counselors, who will be interacting directly with students. So it's not that while we're focusing on coaches, there are investments that work directly with students.
Scott, because we don't have a, you know, because it's a long meeting, could the superintendent of schools answer Councilman Gunkoff's question? That specific question, please. He had a very specific question. Could you have him answer it or somebody in your room answer that question? If you're not prepared to answer it, just say I'm not prepared to answer it.
Could you please repeat?
Someone please.
Yep. Can you please repeat the question so we make sure we answer it?
So the question was, we've got $3.4 million earmarked for professional development, and that money is going directly to teachers. And then you just mentioned that there's also additional funding that's going towards math and literacy coaches, but their role is to educate teachers as opposed to be inside of classrooms offering pull-out or push and support. So it just seems very, teacher focused as opposed to student centric. I mean, we're dumping more money into teachers and professional development, but we're not utilizing those resources so that we're meeting the needs of our students. I just find it really bizarre that we're spending all of this money to assist teachers when that money can go directly into classrooms.
So, Superintendent, do you understand the question? We're all trying to understand your justification for what you're doing. So, could you justify that position why you're doing that, or what you're actually asking to do? Well, did we lose them?
No.
I'm sorry, I might just need to turn the computer here, sorry.
I would suggest the money that you're talking about spending in IT and stuff, I think you guys need to spend a little extra money on your own IT.
President Iglesias, this is interim superintendent. What has happened in the last week that I became the interim superintendent. As a building administrator, the coaches are used in multiple ways. Not only are they also supporting the classroom teachers, but they also co-teach with the teacher to support the teacher to make sure that the students are getting the proper education they need to receive. Coaches also also work with students at times. Sometimes they, instead of pull out, they go into the classroom, so they do a combination of both. So there's been multiple ways that we use, or I've used, the coaches in the building. So it's not just for those 5 days, it's all year long. We have PLCs, which is professional learning communities, where we meet with the teachers, we look at data, we make decisions based on the data, based on the data, we're able to pinpoint those individual students who need extra support. The coaches can go in and also support the classroom teachers in that way.
Okay.
And I, you know,
Councilman Gonzalez? And then
yes,
I'll give you one more, then I gotta move on to the next.
sure, I know
council
you have to
person,
move
okay?
on to other people. It just doesn't, you know, if we're spending $3.4 million for professional development and teachers are responsible for teaching each other through that professional development, it sounds like they're going to do it all in-house. And then the primary function of the math and literacy coaches is to teach other teachers as opposed to be inside of classrooms and offer that push in and pull out support. It just seems like we're overspending. Maybe I'm off base there, but that just seems a bit bizarre.
Thank you, Councilman Gonzalez. I'm gonna move on to the next.
Council President, could I just tag on to that and offer some clarification if I might? Council President?
I have to defer to
Sure.
Councilman
I'm all set, Council President.
As the chair of,
I yield my time.
finance, as the chair of finance.
Councilman Ryan, hang on, please, 1 second. Councilman Gonzalez, are we all set?
Yes, I yield my time.
Councilman
I was
Alducci, are you okay to give deference to the councilwoman to give some additional information?
Just one
Councilman
thought,
Alducci?
please.
Yes, I yield my time. Thank you.
Can I answer what you had just asked me then, Council President, please?
Councilman Alducci, will you?
Out of respect to her position as the chair of finance, I will have Council.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Ryan, could you have the mic?
Thank you, Councilman Goncalves, and thank you, Councilman Narducci. I see where you're going, Councilman Goncalves, and I think it would be helpful if the council could be provided with a breakdown of exactly on what the anticipated spending for that I see 3.2 million for professional development. So I think it would be helpful. And it will also zero in on exactly what they're trying to do with those dollars. So that would be my ask, and I think it might help Councilman Goncalves understand fully where they're going with that. So that's my request. That information could be sent itemized list of that expenditure line item or detailed expenditure to our auditor. Thank you. And thank you, colleagues.
Councilman Narducci, you have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I think that this all should have been brought before finance because of being a budget. But I also have, as Councilman Gonzalez stated, there's 3.4 million there. I forget the exact amount on how many millions of dollars they want to put in this fund to fix up bathrooms and locker rooms. Never once have I heard you guys say that Demo Roberts is going to be part of this conversation, seeing how he is the director of public property. We do have 140 or 160 million bond right now in effect that they're going to be redoing all of the schools, including bathrooms and locker rooms. So I don't understand what you guys are going to be doing with your money, and how come the director of public properties has not even been mentioned, never mind the finance committee or anybody else with these particular funds. And then the other thing, maybe I'm old school or whatever you want to say, but you're getting rid of, or you have already cut 60 teachers. You're putting all these coaches in, which is a good thing. I honestly think that we have failed our children. As soon as, with the state taking over, it's been more of a failure than anything, in my own opinion. We have some great teachers in our school system. I'm hoping that we finally have a interim superintendent from Providence that they could make a superintendent. But again, I just, as Councilman Gonzalez stated, the 3.4 million to assist teachers is better funded other places. And I think the same with what you guys have got in this account for school repairs. Seeing how we've already passed a bond to do what you guys are claiming you're going to do with this, was it $9 million or whatever the heck it was? So, you know, you're asking for more money from us in the school budget, but right now we got almost $12 million that is being spent crazy.
The school department would like to comment on that?
Yeah, so I would say two things. I do think the need for our facilities is more than what's in those in the bond, right? So this is an attempt to enhance, increase, and improve our facilities beyond what will be done in the capital plan.
But you've never reached out to the public properties director to find out if that's true, correct?
We work with Mr. Roberts on a weekly basis on our capital plan, and he's involved in the capital, like he is aware of the capital revolving fund, and he is someone we work closely with. So if he feels like, if you've heard that he doesn't feel like he's being involved, then we need to know. But from all I know, this is not some new initiative. This is something we've been planning this year. And again, this is because our facilities is something we hear daily, weekly, monthly about a need, and that the need outstrips what's in the bond. And so this is a way that we can, over time, increase improvements to our facilities. The other thing that I would just to go, I know just to some of the comments around PD and coaches. I mean, I think we all know that what moves student outcomes is teacher practice, right? The fundamental unit of schooling is the teacher-student interaction. And so there's a number of ways you can improve teaching. One is to develop and train and improve those teachers you have. We need to do a better job of hiring and retaining our best teachers, and also moving on those teachers who aren't performing well and need to find another place to work. But for the vast majority of our teachers, we need to develop them, and that is through either coaching, high quality curricular materials, or professional development. And that's, you know, I hear your concerns, but that's the strategy and the intent here.
Thank you. Councilman Alducci, you have a follow-up? And I'm going to go to the next council person.
No, I just.
Alducci, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm all set for now, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Alducci. Next, Councilwoman Kerwin, you have the mic.
Thanks, Council President. And I actually did just want to comment on Councilman Goncalves' questions. This may not be the case across the district, but I know at least in my ward, in Ward 12, Principal Danny Smith from Kazarian has always asked me for, to get support for teacher trainings from, like our nonprofit partners or other community groups, because he thinks it's really necessary to have teachers be at these trainings, and often the trainings are on vacation days. So, if I was given the choice between a vacation day, if I was a tired teacher and, having to go into a training, I don't know what I would do. And so I think, the least we can do for our teachers is to ensure that they're paid on these days when they're going in when they don't have to. So that's my opinion, and I just wanted to raise it, and it was an experience I had in my own neighborhood. But I did want to ask the PPSD team, and thank you for being here. I wanted to ask you, I saw, which is great, that you're going to be having 18 more guidance counselors in elementary schools. As I'm sure you know, there's been a call from the community, from student organizers at PSU for years to invest in social and emotional support and divest in armed school resource officers. And so I'm wondering, why is there not an increase in guidance counselors in the high schools and middle schools as well? Or is that just, you're putting that in for culture coordinators and not, like trained mental health support, or is that because of the partnership you have with the Providence Community Health Centers? I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
Of course, thank you, Counselor. So, our high schools and schools already have guidance counselors. We have increased, there were 4 additional guidance counselors added through a grant from RIDE this year for 4 of our high schools to support students with progressing to college and careers. So that was added. It's not part of our budget, so that's why you don't see here. But part of the reason is many of them already do have, or they all have guidance counselors, as well as services from social workers and psychologists. And so the strategy here was on kind of other staff in schools from the community who can support. To your point, they're not going to be trained mental health professionals, but we do have those individuals already in our schools. But these are to enhance some of the other activities, whether it's discipline and behavior or working with schools and families. So it's not to replace mental health supports that are needed, but many of our schools have through both the collaborative as well as through our own mental health support staff.
Really quick, do you know how many mental health counselors there are in the high schools?
I don't know off the top of my head that information for you.
Okay, I had just always heard, from students in the last few years, especially from Providence Student Union students, that there were not an adequate amount of mental health counselors in the schools. So that's just something that I was hearing from the community, and maybe somewhere to add in the budget in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman, are you all set at this time?
Yep, thank you.
Deputy Majority Leader Harris, you have the mic. If you could lower your hand, please, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all the council people for all those great questions. Those were questions that we need to be able to understand, especially with what we've been through within this pandemic and the crisis. First of all, I want to thank, again, like the rest of my colleagues, PDSSD, for all the work that you did around getting our kids into a graduation. And thank you, Mr. Zach Scott, for being the spearheader of making sure we went to one of the greatest stadiums in our community, and Connolly Stadium, which I attend 3 different times for 3 different schools. So that was beautiful to see so many young people graduating after the pandemic. Actually, you graduated one of the strongest graduating teams that ever existed ever, because they went through so very much. And I want to, the reason I raised my hand, I was going to ask a question about the councils. I want to dig more. And Councilman Kerwin did such a great job that I don't have to dig even further. But as you know, we have a crisis of homelessness in Rhode Island, period, right? And with that crisis, we have children. I guess I was wondering, and this is all relating to the budget, and Councilman Goncalves started to trigger my mind about how funding is being spent. In the beginning of this pandemic, we attended a lot of calls with trying to figure out what this pandemic was for our schools, the COVID virus. You had a lot of young people misplaced. They were gone. They was out of the school system, because a lot of it had to do with them having to move from the address. You only had the address that you had been accustomed to. And when you went to look for those kids, they weren't there. Most of them have been pushed out. And the numbers are getting bigger. And this week is the last end of the moratorium. How do you have a system in place to make sure we're tracking young people as they are being maybe becoming homeless as a part of the homeless population? And that maybe do your councils and guiding council. I think that's important to talk about those systems in place that you have, not only trauma from young people murdering each other, but also the trauma of of just not having a home? Because I think they go hand in hand, education and a home.
Yeah, well,
If you don't mind, thank you.
yeah. Well, not my area of expertise. I can share a little bit of what we learned this year and how we'll take that forward to next year. So when we opened this school year, given all the disruption of the pandemic, there were times where students wouldn't show up, and we would do all the things that normally would have happened in previous years, and it didn't work. I mean, it was a different experience that people were having as we opened in the pandemic. And what we learned was that, doing the kind of the truancy process or all that was not successful, and we actually needed to go out more frequently to families and understand what the issue, because, and others on the team could speak more eloquently to this, but the challenges a family faces varies depending on the kind of circumstances of the student. So like you mentioned, some may be experiencing homelessness. Some may have been seeking to work in kind of a virtual environment but didn't have Wi-Fi access. And so it meant going out, knocking on doors and finding out where students were because there was such a disruption. So that's one of the critical roles of the school's community specialists I mentioned. Each school in the middle and high school will have one that's 12 months, which means they begin in the summer. And while most of the work during the school year is working with schools and students and families in the school day, during the summer that will be going out and working with our students who have been disengaged, disrupted, to ensure they're ready to come back to start next year, because we know those students who have had attendance or engagement issues this year, and those will be the individuals we prioritize through those school community specialists. But to your point, and I'll work with my colleagues to get a response on if there are any particular kind of additions to that, particularly for our students experiencing homelessness.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Majority. Any other questions by council colleagues? I see, Councilwoman Ryan, you have the mic. Councilwoman Ryan, you're muted.
Thank you, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the transportation. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You have the mic.
Thank you, sir. I'm looking at the transportation line, 55111. Following up again on previous discussions about trying to make sure that our precious dollars are passing on as much as possible to our student population, and resources, obviously, educating our teachers or developing our teachers is equally important. I think this transportation line is very high. It's $19 million for transportation. What is going on with changing policy, or what is the school policy regarding the transportation line item? I mean, are we busing our kids all over the city, or we're trying to get them in localized to reduce some of the transportation costs? What are we doing with that? It's a big number. And obviously we've had challenges in the past with busing. We're just wondering what your philosophy is on transportation.
Absolutely. So let me, it's a great question on transportation, and let me outline, and I apologize, I'm gonna, my kind of background data that I'll talk through. Let me explain a little bit about what goes into that 19 million, and then a few of the things we're doing to reduce it, because we agree, spending money on transportation is not where we want to be spending money as a district. There are, of the 19 million, the majority, or 2/3 of that, around 12 million, goes into yellow bus runs. So those are what's transporting our elementary and middle schools based on eligibility, as well as any special education students. We also spend a little over 3 million on statewide buses. That's for students who are on out-of-district placement and require transportation to that out-of-district placement. And then we spend roughly 3 million on RIPTA bus passes for our high school students who are eligible. And then some smaller ones for cab services and athletic buses is another 600K. So that's what, and we shared that the city, the internal auditor had shared a request. So we gave that breakdown, and if she hasn't, we can share that with you. To talk through a few of the things we're doing to address that. We have moved to a system. We did this under the pandemic, and we're kind of extending it into the future where students are prioritized in placement in their neighborhood school. Now, students still have access to whether they're if they have special needs, if they're looking for a dual language assignment, or they have a particular multilingual learning need that can't be met in their neighborhood. They will certainly have options beyond their schools, but we're prioritizing enrollment of our kindergartners in their neighborhood schools, which we think over time will yield reduced spend on transportation. We've also, this year, we had to open safely under the pandemic. We had to shift our bell times pretty significantly because we couldn't transport at 100% capacity. We actually had to operate first at a third and then 50%. So we had to move our bell times around, and we then, knowing that we'd have to move them back this year, took the opportunity to look at our bell times and make sure they were aligned and that they were efficient, so that we didn't have to spend more on busing than necessary. So while we have to start next year, again, at reduced capacity at around 75%, we do think that the bell times we've put in place will over time yield to kind of result in less reduced spending on transportation, in addition to the priority of neighborhood enrollment.
All right.
Fine.
Yes, thank you for those answers. I just think we spend a lot of money on transportation, and I recognize that you're prioritizing neighborhood schools, and you're hoping that over time that will make a significant impact. But it's going to take a while before you eat away at that cost. And then the only other comment that I have is this body, the council, willingly provides dollars when asked by the school department for funds, because if you're asking for money and it's wisely spent, we want to provide it to help our kids get a good education, or the best education we possibly can. So just a comment that the numbers do not look good, and we need to do a better job. And we need to make sure that the monies that you're spending are spent very wisely. So again, going back to Councilman Goncalves, I would like to look at some of those big numbers in detail, so that we can make sure that we're being as efficient as possible, but also prioritizing the needs of our school kids and our teachers. I wholeheartedly support teacher development. I think every single council member on here this evening does as well. We weren't asking because we're against it. We're asking because we just want to make sure that our precious dollars are being spent in the best way possible. And that's what we're asking for. So we'd like that information provided as best you can. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilman, any other questions, like colleagues? I just have a few follow-up. That's okay. I have a few questions, if I may. First of all, the surplus you had in the last fiscal year, how much was that?
In FY20?
Yes, sir.
I believe it was roughly $11 million as a result of schools being closed through the pandemic.
So now, presently, now you have that then rolled over to this fiscal year, right?
That's the money we talked about, yeah, as reserves for future years. That's correct. It did roll over.
All right. So then, what's the amount? What's the surplus you're running for this present fiscal year?
We're still, still finalizing our expenditures through the end of the fiscal year. As of now, we anticipate it might be around $4 to $5 million. I think it's important to note we still have not signed there are a couple, outstanding items like a teacher contract that could significantly change that, but that's what we're projected for the end of this year.
So it looks like you have a roll of about $15 to $16 million worth of surplus right now, correct?
Correct. Best practices indicate that most school districts have around 4% in reserves. And while we know historically the city would kind of fund if we were to overspend. We understand that that's now not the case. So these are reserves that would, in case there are bad financial times, like if we rewind to this time last year where it looked like those were imminent. But this allows us to kind of adjust and react to any challenging financial times that may lie ahead.
So the question I have for you is, well, you're saying best practice, but aren't all school districts, they're all different, right? So when you apply that best practice, that's not applied to all school districts the same way. For example, certain school districts actually stand alone, right? With an elected school board and et cetera, correct? Right? Versus this is not the case. So different best practices apply. So right now you're running a $15 million surplus you have in your bank account, right? The next question is, you're now asking for you're asking $4.9 million to be added to the city's request to you folks, right? But you also want to put, you want to put $6 million into a revolving capital fund. So now my question to you at this time, if we're going to, $6 million revolving fund, 4.9, now what you've done is you actually artificially increased the city's maintenance of effort for a revolving fund, not for school books, not for teachers, not for education, not for curriculum, but to artificially increase it. So now next year, when you don't want the revolving fund anymore, now the city of Providence is going to be, by law, forced to give you that money because you want to create your own personal capital revolving fund. That's correct. Am I correct on that, sir?
I would respectfully disagree in a few ways. So
No, hang on a second. It's a question. Does that money go towards the maintenance effort, yes or no?
The maintenance of effort is dictated by the statute and the Crowley Act.
Correct. So no, hold it now. What I'm asking you is this, sir. We increase the amount to you, and you're going to use $4.9 million to go into your revolving account, correct? You've now increased the city of Providence's maintenance effort by law. Not about before the Crowley Act even existed. That was the law prior. Isn't that correct? So you're asking us to give you $4.9 million now so you can do your own revolving capital fund. That's what you want the money for, correct?
The maintenance of the $4.9 million is based on the Crowley Act. What the Crowley Act dictates. It dictates how cities and municipalities are expected to increase their aid to schools in such a situation as Providence. It does not speak to how those funds are expended. It speaks to what municipalities are obligated. So I would disagree.
So are you saying, sir, you're exercising the Crowley Act in the city of Providence right now as the only group party in this whole school department? You're claiming the Crowley Act this time, right? But then it will, when you guys relinquish control, then what happens is it does go toward the maintenance effort, correct? And you're asking, based on the Crowley Act, for us to give you money to put into a revolving fund, capital revolving fund. That's what you're looking to put the money in. And you also are running a $15 million surplus, correct? So you got a $15 million surplus, and you want $6 million also in a revolving account. How did you get that through the State House to say, give us more money so we can create a capital account and create a massive surplus and not use the money? How did you explain that first? And then I got a couple on. So I'm trying to grapple with that. How did you actually justify that?
I'll do my best to explain. So the $11 surplus in FY11 that we ran was because we had to close schools for nearly 4 months. And some of our main expenditures like transportation, electricity, utilities, we did not incur those funds. So unexpectedly, that is how that surplus in FY20 was generated. So that's
okay.
We did not officially create it. It was something that was, I think, was responsive to having to close our schools during the pandemic.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me just go, because I'm going to go quick. So my next, I'm going to follow up because the capital revolving fund screams slush fund to me. That's a problem. Okay? And now I'll tell you why. My question to you now is, does that mean somehow you get some type of reimbursement from RIDE? Will you get 91%? So that's $6 million of capital revolving fund. Now, as you know, the city of Providence, we put money forward, but we get reimbursed for RIDE, right? Into the state. Are you guys gonna have that same type of formula where you're gonna get that $6 million and end up getting additional funding? Are you gonna have the formula applied to that $6 million, yes or no?
Yes, so if we invest $6 million to improve our facilities, that money will come back so we can continue investing in our facilities, which.
No, answer the question. Are you going to be, let me try again for you. City of Providence is issuing bonds and we get reimbursement from RIDE and the State House. I think it's 91%. So we get a real bang for our buck. So now you want $6 million to sit into the revolving account in your school department, which will not be able to be utilized for that formula application to get a bigger bang for your buck. Why would anybody want to do that? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you not want to get more money for the $6 million?
We will. So we will be eligible. That's the point of the revolving fund, is that it is eligible for that 91 cents on the dollar, just like you were mentioning, comes through the capital plan. So it's something we seed once and then we'll fund future facilities investments in prior years. So it's a one-time investment that allows us to make that dollar go a lot farther, just to your point, which is all the reason why we think it's a smart investment.
So let me ask this next question. You claim they're going to use some of that $6 million money for emergency matters, right, during the school year. That's what you stated on the record, correct?
We might need to, but more importantly, we're going to use it to do more proactive investments so we avoid those emergencies and we can actually get reimbursed for the roof leaks, the boiler repairs that historically we've had to pay for out of one-time operating dollars that was non-reimbursable.
But emergencies are not reimbursable. They don't apply to the formula. So tell me, how is that? I mean, did you get a special exception from RIDE? I'd like to know because we like to have it in the city too.
Mr. Chairman, there's no special exemption. This is part of the school building authority. Has a number of different programs. In this case, by the district creating their capital reserve fund, they will be eligible to be reimbursed for these kinds of projects. Part of the reason why the city, or the district in this case, is looking at this, I'm looking at the 2016 Jacobs report that looked at all the facilities in Providence. And as you know, these facilities under the Facility Condition Index were given a 71% of our schools were rated poor or worse. And so
you're correct. You're correct. But the bottom line, you're correct. That's the city's obligation. We own the buildings. So we should keep the $6 million so we can then apply it to these projects throughout the school district. Why should we start now? If that's a decision, so somehow you're saying you guys are going to be far more responsive. I'm trying to understand. It seems like what you're doing is you're creating a separate form of government in the school department. That's the first thing. Second thing is that's the city's responsibility because we own the buildings, correct? And you guys claim you're not going to own the buildings. You're not taking ownership. So if you're not going to own them, we're not going to, unless, can we sell them to you guys? Or are you going to ask us to pay to actually purchase them for you guys? So here's my question. That's our responsibility. That's what the city does. If you're looking for $6 million to put into a revolving capital fund, well, it's kind of insulting. That's what the city does on our side. That's our responsibility. And so I'm going to move on because I think that's a problem. And I think you're hearing council colleagues saying you got a problem there. It doesn't pass the test. And your argument of using that report, we understand the report. That's the reason why the city council is issuing millions of dollars to reinvest into our schools. So we're well aware of it. So now you want us to relinquish another $6 million so you guys can do some special projects on your own. Let's get back. Next.
I would just note, this is about FY21. This is not, we are not asking $6 million for FY22. This is using, this is for this year to improve our facilities for years to come.
Now the prior superintendent, just a few weeks back, was touting that part of his negotiations with the teachers union was that they were negotiating and giving a give and take for professional development days. he was actually talking on the radio. This is the previous superintendent. And he was talking about how that was a big achievement as they keep moving on the mediation with the teachers, which means usually if you give the teachers, in this case, 4 more professional days, usually the teachers then give something back, right? There's a back and forth. So he was telling that. So in this moment in time, did the teachers union give you folks something back? Or you just conceded that and now just going to give them the 4 additional professional days?
This is just for this coming school year, so we still need to negotiate a long-term agreement on how professional development days work. We thought that given the pandemic and the need to, as we implement new curriculum, that it was important for this year, but we still need to finalize long-term what professional development looks as part of the teacher contract. This is just a 1-year agreement.
So you're not even sure what the professional development curriculum is going to be, but you just want to put money aside, and you are already giving up positions that you negotiated for the past 2 years in mediation. You're already conceding that and just going to give it to them. I want you guys on the opposite side when I negotiate. Are you also aware that that you're also going to be giving teachers, at least on average, a $1,600 additional salary increase? By the way, so on top of professional days,
that's the 3.4 million. That's the same thing. The 3.4 million is for teachers to attend mandatory PD. It roughly.
No. I'm talking about the salary increase, not just the 3 points. I'm talking about the pay increase.
They're one and the same. They're not different. If you're looking at what we shared with the city auditor, I think that is the 3.4 million is to mandate teachers to go for professional development, and it roughly translates.
So you're going to give them. And how much are they getting with their normal pay raise then? Aren't they getting another 16?
There is no pay raise. We still negotiating a contract.
There's no pay raise in the present CBA? They're not getting a pay increase?
The CBA is expired, so there's no slated salary increase for next fiscal year. That's what we're in negotiation.
So now this actually gives them an artificial salary increase right now, correct?
It doesn't give them an artificial salary increase. It's paying for additional professional development days. I guess I disagree with it being artificial.
No. Well, it's artificial because it's something you guys were touting not more than a few weeks ago on the radio of a major concession in this proposed negotiations, and now you're just giving it away. Now, not me. You guys said it on the radio, not me. So you just gave away your negotiated position. Next question is, how much money have you spent to date on legal fees on the negotiation?
I don't have that figure in front of me, but we can share it after this.
Well, shouldn't it be in your budget?
We have in our FY22 budget.
It's got to be somewhere, right? You've been negotiating. How long have you been negotiating? 2 years?
A year and a half.
So it's got to be in some budget, right?
We can share what our year-to-date expenditures are. That is not in our budget book, but what is in our budget book is our FY22 planned legal fees, and I can maybe miss.
So the past budget book that shows budget for 2020 to 2021 would not reflect the money you spent on legal fees?
I'm sorry, could you ask the question again, Council President?
So let me ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
So in your 2019 to 2020 actual, you have a legal fee line item. And then you have an additional one as it goes to 2020, 2021, and then 2021 to 2022.
Right. So
does your budget reflect how much you've paid to date for legal assistance and fees? And where would it be in the budget? Where is it in your budget?
You're talking about our FY21 actuals. That is not included in our budget book because the fiscal year has not concluded. So we have what's in there FY21 budgeted amount. We can share our year-to-date actuals, and then when the books are closed, we can share that's why they're always, because we produced this report prior to the fiscal year ending, we don't have, there aren't actuals. We just have the year-to-date, which, as you know, can change prior to the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay. So let me continue. Presently, right now, what are your enrollment projections? What's the present enrollment? Let me do an easy one. What's your present enrollment?
I don't have the exact figure in front of me.
Okay. What is your enrollment projections?
We are projecting, I can get that after this. We are projecting, given we had a pretty significant decline in enrollment this year, as many districts did, particularly in kindergarten, about a 3 to 4% decline, which was seen across the state and across the nation. We anticipate a slight bump next year as more kindergartners come back. So I can pull, I don't have it right in front of me, but I can pull what our projections are for next year and share that.
Has that have an impact on the state aid?
Projections for next year? Yeah, so we have our state aid is based on the way enrollment is calculated this year. I understand is a little different from the state, is based on historical enrollment given kind of one-time impact of the pandemic. So we are using, certainly enrollment is impacted in state aid, but I believe this year state aid was the enrollment was based on prior years, given that there was a significant decline across the state.
So when will you have those? Can you throw those enrollment projections? All that information?
We can have some.
Thank you, sir. Next, I want to go to the action.
Mr. President.
Yep, Councilman Nakuchi.
I feel that we're going over their budget. I feel that they should be in front of the Finance Committee to discuss the budget moving forward. Obviously, we have a lot of questions on it, and again, I think that these questions and the particular budget matters should be in front of the Finance Committee.
Duly noted. Thank you, Councilman Nakuchi. I'm going to go back to your budget book, if I could, please. Can you tell me, if you go to your the 5-year comparison by department and each of the schools, and I'll just give you an example. Can you explain I go stop on Allen, Shawn, Feinstein at Broad Street. Why did their budget go down from the budget of 2020? Why did it go down? Now the budget of 2020 was 4.5 mil, right? And now the proposed budget is 3.9. Why would it go down?
Yeah.
And why would that particular?
Yeah, I can share, and Mr. Patisi can correct me if I misspeak. So when you'll see, one of the important things to note is when you look at, you'll see actuals in FY 18, 19, and 20, and then 21 and 22 are obviously just the budget and proposed. Several kind of large expenses, particularly at our elementary school, are not allocated to the school level until the end of the year when we complete our actuals. So to give you an example, transportation, if you were to go to the multi-year by object, multi-year by department, let's stay on that. And if you scroll to the bottom and you look at our transportation department, see that the actuals, are very little in prior years. And then in the budget, it's pretty significant. And that's because those funds, once the year is done and we're able to do the math on how transportation was allocated at the school level, those funds are then dispersed to the school level. So for our elementary schools, you'll see some changes there because that's where the vast majority of our transportation funds are spent. So why it's a little, we want to make sure we're allocating costs appropriately. And so that's why the actuals are adjusted at the end of the year, but we don't yet have those actuals for FY21 and certainly not for FY22 yet.
When will you get the actuals?
I think it's typically done after the conclusion of the fiscal year, after we're able to finalize our expenditures for the year. But Mr. Patisi, would you?
When's the end of the fiscal year?
End of the fiscal year, June 30.
Thank you. All right. So let me go to the next one. So then Alfred Lima, can you explain that in that case, it's just the opposite? I guess it's because, did you close the school? Because that school went from 5.6 million to 9.9 million. So can you explain now, I know it's not actual versus budgeted, so
Yeah.
maybe you can help me with this journey. Now, and this one is now almost double. Can you explain to me why you would double it?
Certainly. So Forts and Lima are schools that operate within the same building. Earlier this year, given some changes in enrollment, that school was combined under one school leader. And therefore, you'll see all the funding for that school, the budget is now located under Lima. So if you look down, you'll see that Charles Forts is zeroed out. I wouldn't say we use the school because it's the staff are still there. They're just operating as, instead of two separate schools within one building, they're now kind of operating as one school within that building with one school leader.
Okay, thank you. So then, let me just go to a couple other ones, and then maybe you can help. Can you explain to me the school board line item? It increased from $247,783 to $948,663. Can you explain to me why it's almost $1 million for the school board? What do they use that money for?
Chris, do you know that, or is that?
Yeah, so the $247,000 is actual expenditures and 973 is budgeted expenditures. So
that, by the way, so you're off greatly there. So can you explain to me then what happened? Why is the school board spending, almost 75% more? What's going on? That's a big.
So that's part of, so to go back to your original question about the legal fees, so that's where the $580,000 of legal fees is budgeted for in the $973,000. Well, you'll see that it was actually expensed at the superintendent line, at the superintendent department of $1.3 million. So it's actually budgeted but it was expensed at the superintendent's.
Okay. So that's where you bury it then. You don't bury it on the legal line, you bury it in the school.
Hold on, wait a minute. Well, each department has its own line, just like in the city budget. So it's not burying it anywhere. Each department has its own object codes. So.
Okay, well, it just says school board. Where does it say legal fees for school board?
It's in the object code. It's in the object code, 2-year by object code or by object code.
You didn't provide that. You didn't provide that.
It is it's in the budget book.
Okay, all right.
So if you would like line items by each department, we could provide those.
Yes, please, sir. That used to happen every year. My next question for you is that where the legal fees for the negotiations are?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's where the money. Okay, I see. And then on top of you also have there's still another legal line too, though. Now, what's that legal line for? So the school board has a legal line buried. What you said, you get an object codes, I get it, then you get deeper into the weeds. But then there's another legal line, so tell me, what is that money for?
That is the legal department. That is the deputy solicitor and his staff. That is the staff in that department.
Okay, thank you. And then can you go to the next, because I don't have your line item code. Virtual Learning Academy, it looks like, I guess, we had the 600,000 needed because of the pandemic, I presume. And was that money reimbursable from the federal government, that 600,000?
So some of it was, Chris, correct me, I assume, certainly some of that was reimbursable, but that 600, there may have been portions of it that weren't because it was either after the expiration of funding or it was unallowable. But much of it was reimbursable. But Chris, do you know if that 600 reflects just the share of the local budget, or is that the? Yeah.
Yes, that is. You are correct in your statements.
So does that mean when you're not going to be spending any money for Virtual Learning Academy, you're just dropping that now, shutting that down? Or what's happening with the virtual? Virtual Learning Academy. You're no longer doing it? Is that what you're saying there?
Correct. We do not plan to have a virtual learning academy for next school year.
Are there any parents or kids feeling that they need at least some of that for a little while, or we're just stopping it altogether?
So, our desire is to have, is to bring as many students back 5 days a week. We've seen, as long as public health conditions continue improving, that we'll have full in-person learning for next year. And obviously, if there are individual needs of students that we need to understand and address and provide supports for, we'll do that. But we don't think we need it at the Virtual Learning Academy at the scale we had it this year. So I think, our plan right now is to not have a separate Virtual Learning Academy. We'll obviously pay attention to public health conditions and guidance from the governor's office and RIDO on safely reopening.
Okay, thank you. Literacy, can you tell me what literacy is and you're not funding it and why?
Apologies, Council President. Could you direct me to you said literacy?
I know you're, Christopher.
Yes.
What it called, has a greater understanding of the budget than I do, so maybe he can help us.
Sure. The literacy department was part of the restructuring, the reorganization of the central office. So therefore, those funds are not being budgeted at that department. It was part of the restructuring, the reorganization.
So will that literacy and innovation zone, will they eventually just disappear completely then? Should they be in the budget anymore?
Some of those staff did stay and they got repurposed into other departments, and some of the staff was part of our reorganization reductions.
What about mathematics? Can you explain to me what that means?
The mathematics department, so that's part of the staff that is budgeted at that department.
So that means, is that $151,374 we have for the mathematics department?
Correct. Some of the staff is funded federally. So those are the portions that have to come out of the local dollars to fund those positions.
So when I'm looking at this line item, this is a personnel line item. Is that what's going on here now?
Yes, those are salary. Those are salary and fringe for those FTEs plus any small office supplies for that department. Not to run mathematics district-wide. Those are budgeted at the school level.
So then, what is this mathematics group doing then? If you're telling me the mathematics departments are funded at the school level in each individual school budget, then what are these folks doing? Where are they?
Yeah.
I don't know. You tell me it's dispersed, so then why shouldn't you have zero then and just say that it's in the individual school department? I mean, individual school budget. So
to chime in a bit, we have a limited number of staff, some of that are partially funded by local dollars, partially funded by title dollars, and they help work on developing and identifying curriculum for district use. So they might be, as we've rolled out these new curriculum at the elementary, middle, and high level, these are the staff who would help us in identifying that curriculum, developing it, rolling it out to staff members across the district.
So this is what staff members at the headquarters, is that what you're saying? That develops the mathematical schematic or matrix?
Yeah,
or
I think
whatever?
these are individuals that would be located out of 797 who are often in schools, but they would be what you would consider central office employees.
So what's research and assessment? What's that for? What do those individuals do? Is that for salary or is that for something else?
I believe what's included in this line is both, in these lines are both personnel and non-personnel. Much of our budget is in personnel. So that's probably a majority of what those funds are. For research and assessment, that's a department that's been longstanding that helps us on our all of our assessments that we do, RICAS, as well as formative interim assessments that are done across the district. They also help around research projects for the district to make sure we're that we can study the work that we do, often in partnership with universities, so that we can kind of understand work we're doing. So they kind of have a dual role in both that research as well as managing district-wide assessments.
So I also noticed that it looks like the science division, I guess, is 86,000. So that's also a person or persons helping you with the curriculum. Is that what you're saying? So let me ask you this question. Why is it that you disbanded your literacy and then funneled it out as part of some restructuring you mentioned? But mathematics you hung on to, looks like maybe one person, and your research and assessment, your science, your social studies, why did you hang on to those particular divisions and then not literacy? Like what happened? Like it would seem logic would dictate that you would disband those other ones since they were all part. You sound like you reallocated or moved those folks to the greater population somewhere. How come you didn't do for the rest of the divisions? Why is literacy more important or less important than mathematics or science or vice versa? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean they're all important, particularly literacy and math. I mean, I think what may have happened is as we were doing this restructuring, there was a desire to have closer alignment between our multilingual learner department and literacy work. And so some of that may, when you see an increase in the multilingual learner department, ELL department, that may be because there was a move of some of that work from the literacy, a standalone literacy department. But I'd want to confirm that was the change there, but we can get back to you.
Okay, and then internal audit. Did you have something you wanted to state? Stated internal audit. Internal audit. When she comes back,
Yes,
we can go.
can you hear me?
Yes,
Mr.
we can.
Chair?
Internal audit.
Okay.
Yes, you have the mic.
Zach, Chris, thank you very much for getting these responses back to me. I know it was short notice, but I really have to clarify one thing through this whole meeting. You're saying on the professional development days that it's 4 days and it's going to cost 3.4 million. Is that in addition to the 3.2 million that you already have budgeted in the FY21 budget?
Mr. Patisi, I believe it's in addition, but Chris, can you clarify?
All right.
The $3.4 million of new expenditures is for the 4 additional PD days to pay teachers at their daily rate.
Okay, so for the committee's clarification, they have $3.2 million in the fiscal year 21 budget for professional development. They've only spent 16,000 to date. So my understanding then next year it will be 6.6 million for professional development to accommodate these 4 additional days. Is that a fair statement, gentlemen?
I want to make sure. So the 3.4 is for the 4 additional days. The PD budgeted at the 3.2 is when schools budget at the kind of at their individual school level when they allocate professional development costs during the year after school on Saturdays. That I think is reflective of the 3.2. But the 3.4 is an addition for next year, and it is for those 4 days.
Okay.
But Mr. Scott, is it correct? How much money have you spent to date on it? Internal audit's reporting, did you say $16,000? Is that what you said, internal audit?
Yes.
So, Mr. Scott, can you explain having all that money and only spending $16,000 and now asking for more? That's the question.
Chris, could you?
Sure, absolutely. So some of those, the initial school of thought, if you will, was to add that money for professional development. Some of those schools utilize those funds for after-school programs and Saturday tutorials that didn't necessarily fall under that classification of professional development, and they rolled up to the regular salary line item, which is 51110. So they just weren't expensed to that professional development line. However, schools were utilizing those funds for after-school programs and Saturday tutorials.
So,
Classified as, they weren't classified as professional.
so when you pass the budget, you state you're gonna use X, but then you guys make it almost like fungible and you move the money around to do other things with? That's what it sounds like, right? So you didn't use the money for professional development, you ended up using it for other things, correct?
So what I shared is we didn't have a state, the budget, the FY21 budget wasn't passed until late December, January. And so we built our spending plan mid-year. We did our best to identify where we would need spending during the pandemic for when we kind of received the FY21 budget 6 months after it typically comes in. And so that was our estimate of that it would be used for professional development. But as we learned from schools, some of it was used more for after school and Saturday school support. But that was, I'll be honest in saying it was a challenge, receiving funding mid-year that you have to kind of, plan on short notice. So it wasn't that we had planned for this in May and then that this happened. It was, we were found out in December that there was the state budget was being passed.
And one other point of clarification, if I may, our salary group is only grown by $3.1 million, not 5.5. So there's a reduction of $2.4 million in the after-school programs, which is partially reflected for the reduction in the professional development line. So it's 3.1.
Is that because you said is that because you also have less employees now?
That is part of the analysis.
I mean, the reason why your salary is down is because less employees, right?
That is part of the analysis that we gave the internal auditor to roll for the salary reconciliation.
Right. Okay. So, so the other follow-up I had is that I like you to kind of put in writing. Can you justify why instead of funding more positions, for example, I think Councilman Goncalves was talking to some other councilmen about student advisors, social emotional helpers, and having those kinds of positions in our schools versus putting $6 million into a capital revolving fund sitting there when our children need that kind of direct help. So I think that's a question I think you guys really need to answer, because you're sending the wrong message. You need more help in the high schools, the middle schools, these young kids, these young adults. They need as much help as possible. And instead of getting the help, you're putting money in some revolving fund because you want to now start doing your own thing on capital investments. And by the way, you're sitting also on a $15 million surplus. I'm still trying to understand what you're doing.
I think it's important just to clarify. So the $6 million is not $6 million we're putting in each year. It is put in one time so that it seeds future facilities. That's why we could not, it's not the same to just say, use that on personnel, because that would only last for a year, and then we'd have to, then we couldn't fund those staff. So this $6 million is one that pays.
It's a one-time ask. You're saying the $6 million is a one-time revolving fund ask? Is that what you're saying?
It's not an ask for FY22. It's an FY21, and it would be $6 million that would be put in one time. As we do work that is reimbursable, we receive housing aid to replenish that fund so we can continue doing projects in the future, but it won't, because it's reimbursed at 91 cents on the dollar, we won't need to keep replenishing it with large investments, because the housing aid will allow us to recoup those funds to continue that revolving fund.
Would the school department consider or ride that if the $6 million is there, that it wouldn't be used against the city's maintenance effort? So when the city does take it over, it doesn't have to, because what happens, if it's a one-time shot in the arm you're looking for, then why shouldn't we consider it that way, so it's not a constant burden on the city taxpayer on one end in order for you guys to get your revolving fund on the other end?
So just to clarify, we're not requesting the capital revolving fund. This is the revolving fund is in FY21. This is not part of our request for FY22. So it's not part of a request for that.
So the $6 million is already in a revolving account. Is that what you're saying?
We have not transferred it yet as we're closing out the our FY22 spending. But that
Also, you
before
plan on transferring it into the, okay. So the goal is to get that money that you have in the present fiscal year, because you have additional surplus, and you're gonna put it into this revolving account, correct?
correct.
Okay, I see. So, and then on the same end, you're asking the city for another 4.9 mil, while you have all this money sitting around in an account. I'm just, by the way, that doesn't help your cause. It just sounds like you're hoarding money and not spending it on the things that we need to get done for these kids, but that's what it sounds like. Turn of order?
Thank you, Mr. President. So the $6 million, is that in addition to the surplus of the $5 million that you mentioned earlier in this meeting? So are you potentially projecting an $11 million surplus at the end of this year?
No, so that 6 million is in addition to the 4 to 5, but that is based, that 4 to 5 is after we've seeded the capital revolving fund. And again, like a reminder of why why that funding is where it is because we received state aid and city aid in the middle of in December, well after the fiscal year had began. We received stimulus dollars that were able to cover a lot of the expenditures we have. So that is why this kind of one-time circumstance, and again, why we think it's wise to put this funding into a capital revolving fund that will allow this money to be used in future years.
Okay, Mr. President, one last question. And is that assuming that you will be receiving the FY21 maintenance of effort from the city?
Yes, it would assume that we receive the FY21
okay.
effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
So that's once again, the city is giving money to you so you can put into a capital revolving fund. So all you're asking us to do is to give you money to put into a revolving account and then force our maintenance effort to be higher so you guys can have a revolving account. That's what you're saying. So, okay.
I mean, like I shared before, this is what we understand the obligation to be under the Crowley Act. We think it's a wise investment to put it in a revolving fund that will carry on for years in an area that we've heard consistently from our students and families and staff is an area of need.
All right. Mr. Scott, is it fair to say that your community is our community?
Absolutely.
And is it fair to say that the City Council and the City of Providence has been working on that to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars and listening to that community? Because it's our community that we actually represent. Is that fair to say, sir?
We're incredibly grateful for the capital plan that is in place to improve our facilities, and we think it's important to do, given some of the information Victor shared, that there's more work that's needed, and so we think this is a wise way to increase and enhance our investment in our facilities, because while that capital bond is an incredible amount of money to support facilities, there's a lot of evidence that our facilities need more than just that.
So why don't you just give your laundry list of requests, give it to the City of Providence since we own the buildings, and we'll just address them with the $6 million ourselves. I mean, you guys are not in maintenance, not in the facilities business, are you? I mean, you actually have an entire organization of facility division.
If you like, I think what we'd like to do is to get you, additional information in terms of how this capital reserve fund can provide additional supports and be able to meet a lot of the obligations that we see across the district. And I think, as you said, we'd like to be able to send you that information and provide you with greater detail in writing.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. I just think that it seems like you're creating duplicitous divisions and departments and redundancies, in which they actually cost more money for the city taxpayer as well as the state taxpayer. Because you folks
will send you the information that
your own little operation. I know. I appreciate you going to give me the information. Believe me, I've heard this from the school department since day one. I appreciate it. The reality is that you give me great cause and great pause on what you're asking for, because you're looking not to pour the money into the school systems itself and the kids and the education.
Mr. Chairman, I think that you will agree that by asking for funds for the school buildings, that goes into the kids and the teachers who are sitting in some of the buildings that have been leaking for years. So I think that you will agree, funds are going to the schools, not to a personal slush fund, as you said earlier, but rather that they are going directly into the schools that are needed, because 71% of them are rated poor or worse by the Jacobs report in 2016. So we will provide information in where we believe those funds are necessary.
No, I agree with that. I appreciate that, and that's the reason why me and my council colleagues have supported issuing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of bond initiatives on that.
And that is
we take it very serious, but we are concerned about the checks and balances of just having money given to a department. Eventually, by the way, will come back to the city of Providence, a department having its own independent type of division like that. That creates concern and consternation. I'm talking about finances right now. So that is a great concern. And you're right, I appreciate you bringing up that report several times, but I also want to reiterate the fact that the council has taken that report, embraced the report, and is addressing that report, especially this council. And we're doing our part. And the city taxpayer has supported that effort to do that. They understand that it's important for our schools not to leak. I agree with you. And as someone who's argued and issued bonds to build new schools in my neighborhood, I know exactly what that means. All right? My concern is, I'd like to have the school department teach and educate our children, and then if you need to put us to more tasks to get the buildings in better shape, we will do that. No, we will do our part. That's what I'm saying. The problem is that when a department starts, getting their mission statement and start making it too overbroad, you end up losing sight of your main mission statement, right? I mean, I know part of your PowerPoint talks about your proficiency scores. I mean, they're in the single digits. It's disheartening. I feel bad for the children and the parents in the school district right now. I feel like they're not getting the quality education they deserve. And this was pre-COVID, by the way. This isn't even post-COVID. I hate to even see what they look like post-COVID. So my goal is to hopefully help you guys stay on mission, and we'll do our part and stay on our mission. And if you need to keep us to task and say, hey, take us to task, we can put more funding in our buildings, we'll do that. We'll work on that. Well, right now, the role is to try to keep you guys on task to educate our children. That's where I'm from. Councilman Anthony, I think you had your hand up, I think.
No, I didn't, but thank you. I agree with you, Council President.
Thank you. That, Internal Order, do you have any other questions?
Not at this moment, thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I do appreciate you coming before the council. I know sometimes it's not easy. I know sometimes the questions are hard, but we are also elected representatives of our city, many of us for many years, and we're just trying to get the best school system possible for the people that we represent. It has nothing to do with you folks personally. It has to do with the fact that we need the school department to really turn around. We need to get it moving, and we want to do everything we can to help make that happen. Once again, it's disheartening to see these young men and women in our school district it's tough, so, and, they're ready, willing, able to learn. We just have to figure out how to give them that opportunity. So I want you to know we do support the school department. We do support its mission statement. We just want to kind of keep it on track so we can help get to the promised land of getting these children the best education possible. I know there's some deliverables. I ask you if you could forward them to the Internal Auditor. I believe my council colleagues may have some follow-up questions. I'll ask them to forward it to you guys. If need be, we're going to bring you back again, and then we can talk about the deliverables and see if there's anything else. I want you to know sincerely, I do support your effort on behalf of me and my constituents. It's important that you succeed. We want you to succeed. And thank you for your time. Council colleagues, do you have any further last questions or comments at this time? With With that, thank you, gentlemen. We'll bring you back at a later date. Be well, be safe. Acting Superintendent, good luck. God bless, and be well. Do I have a
Thank
motion,
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
do I have a motion to adjourn at this time?
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn at this time.
Deputy Majority makes that motion. I have a second by President Pro Tem.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.